The beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing she heard. Slow, rhythmic, like a distant echo calling her back to the world. Then came the feeling of warmth, the weight of a blanket against her skin, the scent of antiseptic in the air. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy as if carrying the weight of years. Then, a voice. Soft, hesitant. "Doctor, she's waking up." Her eyes opened to a blur of white walls and unfamiliar faces. The fluorescent light overhead stung her retinas, forcing her to blink rapidly. A woman in a nurse's uniform hovered nearby, her eyes filled with cautious relief. She tried to speak, but her throat was raw, dry as sandpaper. The nurse quickly brought a cup of water to her lips, tilting it gently. The cool liquid soothed her burning throat, but it did little to calm the whirlwind in her mind. "Where am I?" she croaked. The nurse smiled warmly. "You're in Al Noor Medical Center, Dubai. You've been in a coma for 14 months. 14 months? The words hit her like a freight train. Her heart pounded in her chest, an erratic rhythm that made the machines beside her beep louder. "No, that can't be right," she murmured, shaking her head. "That's not possible." But as she tried to sit up, the weight in her abdomen made her freeze. A heavy foreign sensation. She looked down, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands trembled as they moved over the curve of her stomach, round, firm, unmistakable. She was pregnant. Panic surged through her veins like fire. No, this isn't real. This can't be real." The nurse reached for her hand, her touch gentle yet firm. "Miss Evelyn, I need you to take deep breaths. I understand this is a shock, but I promise you and your baby are safe." "Baby?" A strangled sound left her lips. No, I'm a virgin. This isn't possible." The room fell into a stunned silence. Even the nurse's expression flickered with something unreadable. Just then, the door swung open and a tall man in a crisp white coat entered, followed by another figure, a man in an expensive tailored suit. His presence filled the room instantly, commanding attention without a single word. His eyes, dark and intense, locked onto hers with something that sent a chill down her spine. The doctor cleared his throat. "Miss Evelyn, there is something you need to know." She could barely breathe, her fingers curling into the bedsheets. "Tell me," she whispered, her voice shaking. The suited man stepped forward. His gaze was unwavering, his jaw tight as if restraining a storm of emotions. "My name is Sheikh Rami Al-Fayed," he said, his voice deep, authoritative. "And that child you carry is mine." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears, drowning out everything else. "Impossible," she choked out, her vision swimming. But the way he looked at her, so certain, so unyielding, sent terror crawling up her spine. "How?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "How's that even possible?" Rami exhaled slowly, his fingers clenching at his sides. "Because, Evelyn, you were part of an experiment. One that you never consented to." Her stomach lurched. The air in the room grew suffocating. What did they do to me?" Her voice cracked with the weight of horror, fear clawing at her chest. The doctor hesitated before answering, his face solemn. "You were in an accident 14 months ago. When you were brought here, there was an unauthorized procedure. Someone implanted an embryo inside you, and we only discovered it too late." Evelyn's breath hitched. No, that can't be." Rami's expression darkened. "Believe me, I was just as shocked when I learned the truth. But I swear to you, Evelyn, I will find out who did this and make them pay." Tears burned in her eyes, but rage quickly overtook the fear. "You think that makes this okay? You think any of this is okay?" Rami's jaw tightened. "No, nothing about this is okay. But right now you are carrying my child. And I will do whatever it takes to protect both of you." Evelyn shook her head violently, her heart hammering. "I don't even know you. And you expect me to believe?" Before she could finish, a piercing scream echoed from the hallway. The nurse gasped, rushing to the door. But Rami was already there, moving with the speed of a predator. Gunshots rang out. Evelyn barely had time to react before Rami turned, his expression deadly. "We need to leave. Now." The air in the hospital room turned suffocating. The sound of gunshots echoed down the sterile white corridors, each blast sending a tremor through Evelyn's already fragile state. She barely had time to process the horror of what she had just learned. That she, a virgin, was somehow carrying the child of a man she had never met, before a new terror gripped the room. Rami moved swiftly, his tall, imposing figure a blur as he turned toward the door. The nurse let out a panicked gasp and darted to the corner, pressing herself against the wall. The doctor, eyes wide with fear, stood frozen in place. Evelyn, still weak from months of immobility, clutched the bedsheets, her heart pounding against her ribcage. What is happening? Rami's dark eyes met hers, sharp with urgency. We don't have time for explanations. I need you to trust me. Trust him? How could she possibly trust him? She didn't know this man. She had woken up to a nightmare. Her body no longer her own. Her future hijacked by forces she couldn't even begin to understand. And now armed men were in the hospital? No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. I don't even know what's real anymore. He strode toward her, his movements precise, controlled, yet his voice softened just enough. Evelyn, listen to me. I don't know who did this to you, but someone is trying to keep the truth hidden. That's why we're in danger. If we stay here, they will come for you and the baby. Panic seized her chest. The baby. Her trembling hands instinctively moved to her stomach. Despite everything, despite the sheer impossibility of it all, there was a life inside her. A child. And if what Rami was saying was true, then whoever was behind this wouldn't just stop at an experiment. They'd make sure their secrets never came to light. The door burst open, and two men in black tactical gear stormed inside. Rami was faster. Before Evelyn could scream, he lunged forward, disarming the first man with a brutal twist of his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. The second attacker swung at him, but Rami ducked, driving a hard punch to the man's ribs. A sickening crack filled the air, followed by a strangled groan. The first gunman recovered quickly, reaching for the weapon on the floor. Evelyn watched in horror, her body frozen in terror, until her instincts took over. With the last strength she had, she grabbed the metal four-pole beside her bed and swung it as hard as she could. The metal crashed against the man's shoulder, knocking him off balance. Rami took the opportunity to finish him with a swift kick to the head. The room fell silent. Evelyn panted, her hands shaking violently. She had never been in a fight in her life, and yet, something primal had taken over. Rami turned to her, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he reached for her wrist and pulled her up from the bed. Her legs were weak, but he caught her before she could fall. "We have to move," he said firmly. "Now." She didn't argue. She couldn't. The reality of the situation had set in. Someone wanted to silence her. Rami led her out of the hospital room and down the hallway, his grip on her tight but not forceful. The once quiet medical center was now a war zone. Nurses and doctors scattered in panic, alarms blaring in the distance. The elevator was too risky, so Rami pulled her toward the emergency staircase. "Who are they?" Evelyn asked breathlessly as they descended, her voice raw with fear. "Who's after us?" Rami's jaw clenched. "The same people who put you in that coma." Her heart dropped. "You know who they are?" "I have my suspicions," he admitted. "But I need proof, and keeping you alive is the only way to get it." The stairwell was eerily empty, their rushed footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Evelyn clung to the railing, her breath coming in short gasps as they descended floor after floor. Her body was weak, exhausted, but the adrenaline pushed her forward. When they reached the ground floor, Rami stopped, his body going rigid. He peeked around the corner before pulling her back against the wall. Black SUVs. They're waiting at the main entrance. Her stomach twisted. "We're trapped." His lips pressed into a thin line. Then, after a moment of thought, he glanced up. "Not necessarily. How do you feel about helicopters?" Evelyn blinked. "Excuse me?" Before she could protest, he was already pulling her toward the maintenance exit. The air outside was thick with the heat of Dubai's night, and the city skyline stretched beyond them, glowing with lights. A sleek black helicopter was stationed on the rooftop of a neighboring building. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Rami gave her a look. "Would you rather take your chances with the men out front?" She swallowed hard, gripping her stomach protectively. "Fine, but if I die, I'm haunting you." He smirked, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Fair enough. Now hold on tight." Then, before she could protest, he scooped her into his arms and took off running. The rush of wind against her face was the last thing Evelyn registered before Rami's strong arms tightened around her. In a blur, he carried her across the rooftop, his movements swift and precise, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. The helicopter ahead hummed with life, its blades slicing through the night air, ready for takeoff. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. None of this made sense. A day ago, no, a few hours ago, she had been in a coma, her biggest concern being how she had mysteriously gotten pregnant. Now, she was running for her life with a man she barely knew, a man who claimed to be the father of her unborn child. As they approached the helicopter, a tall, muscular man dressed in black tactical gear stood by the open door, scanning the perimeter with an assault rifle slung over his shoulder. His gaze flicked to Rami, then to Evelyn, before giving a sharp nod. "You're late," the man grunted, gripping Rami's arm in a firm shake before helping them inside. "Complications," Rami muttered, his grip never loosening on Evelyn as he guided her into a seat. The second she was strapped in, the helicopter lurched upward, the force pressing her against the seat. Below, the hospital rooftop shrank into the distance, and with it, the life she had known before all of this. Evelyn struggled to catch her breath. Her body was still weak, her mind reeling. She turned to Rami, eyes blazing. "Start talking. Now." He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You already know the basics. Someone implanted an embryo inside you while you were in a coma. What you don't know is why." She swallowed hard. "Then tell me." Rami studied her for a moment as if weighing how much to say. "I'm one of the wealthiest men in Dubai. My family owns oil refineries, real estate, shipping companies. There's no shortage of enemies who would want to control me through blackmail, leverage, or blood." Evelyn's fingers clenched in her lap. "You think someone used me to carry your heir?" The words felt surreal, like something out of a twisted nightmare. "Not think," he corrected, his dark eyes unreadable. "No." Her stomach turned violently. "That's insane. Who would do something like that?" "Someone powerful. Someone with access to cutting-edge medical technology. And someone who expected you to never wake up." A cold shiver ran down her spine. "They wanted me dead?" Rami's jaw tightened. "It's possible. But if they truly wanted you gone, they would have done it already. The fact that you're alive means you're still useful to them. That makes you a target." Evelyn's breath hitched. The reality of it all was suffocating. She was supposed to be safe in a hospital, recovering. Instead, she was caught in the middle of something much bigger, something dangerous. She shook her head, her hands trembling. "I don't understand. How does any of this make sense? If I was nothing more than a random woman, why choose me? Why go through all this trouble?" Rami hesitated, then leaned forward. "That's what I'm trying to find out." The helicopter suddenly tilted slightly, making Evelyn grip the armrests. The man with the rifle, Rami's apparent bodyguard, moved toward them, his face serious. "We have company." Rami's expression darkened. "How many?" "2 SUVs. No insignias. They're tailing us from below." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "They followed us?" "Of course they did," Rami said grimly. "They were never going to let you go that easily." Panic swelled in her chest. "What do they want with me?" Rami didn't hesitate. "Control. If they have you, they control the narrative. They can erase the evidence. Make sure no one ever learns the truth." Evelyn's breathing quickened. "You mean they'd kill me?" His silence was answer enough. The bodyguard's radio crackled. "They're making a move. Possible weapons sighted." Evelyn's heartbeat slammed against her ribs. "Oh my God." Rami acted fast. "Pilot, take us higher. Now." The helicopter surged upward, climbing rapidly into the night sky. Below, the SUVs swerved violently on the roads, their headlights piercing the darkness. Then gunfire. Sharp, rapid bursts echoed through the air. The helicopter jerked slightly as bullets ricocheted off the metal frame. Evelyn let out a strangled gasp, instinctively shielding her stomach. "They're shooting at us?" The bodyguard returned fire, leaning out of the open door. The sound of his rifle was deafening, rattling her bones. She squeezed her eyes shut, heart hammering in terror. "We'll lose them over the desert," the pilot announced. "They can't follow us there." Rami nodded sharply. "Do it." Evelyn forced herself to breathe as the city lights below faded, replaced by endless stretches of golden sand. The chaos of the moment still clung to her skin, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. And whoever was after her wasn't going to stop. The hum of the helicopter blades filled the tense silence as the cityscape disappeared behind them, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the desert. Evelyn's heart pounded, her breath shallow as she tried to process everything that had happened in the past hour. She was pregnant. With a stranger's child. A child that had been put inside her while she was in a coma. And now people were trying to kill her for it. Rami sat across from her, his dark eyes fixed on the desert below. His bodyguard, the man with the assault rifle, scanned the horizon, his finger resting on the trigger, ready for anything. Evelyn clenched her hands in her lap, trying to stop them from shaking. Where are we going? Rami's gaze flicked to her, his expression unreadable. Somewhere safe. Safe. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I woke up in a nightmare, I was almost kidnapped, shot at, and now I'm running for my life. Tell me, Rami, where exactly is safe? He exhaled slowly, leaning forward. I know this is overwhelming, but you need to trust me. Whoever did this to you, whoever put my child inside you, won't stop until they have what they want. And until we figure out why you're in danger. Her chest tightened. I never asked for this. I know, he said quietly. But right now your survival depends on me. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy chain. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but deep down she knew he was right. The helicopter began its descent and Evelyn glanced out the window. Below them, a sprawling estate emerged from the golden dunes, an oasis of luxury in the middle of the desert. The property was surrounded by high walls, lined with security cameras and guarded by men in dark uniforms carrying rifles. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. The helicopter touched down on a private helipad and Rami reached for her hand. His grip was firm but not forceful. Come on. Evelyn hesitated but followed. Her legs were shaky as she stepped onto solid ground, the warm desert air wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Guards moved swiftly, securing the perimeter. A sleek black SUV waited a few feet away, the engine already running. Rami led her toward it without a word, and the bodyguard climbed into the front seat while they slid into the back. The vehicle rumbled forward, taking them through massive iron gates that sealed shut the moment they entered. The estate was breathtaking. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm breeze, and the architecture was a fusion of modern glass designs and traditional Arabian elegance. But despite its beauty, Evelyn felt trapped. She turned to Rami. Now what? Now, he said, watching her carefully. We find out the truth. The SUV pulled up to the main entrance, and the moment they stepped inside, a team of staff greeted them. Housekeepers, security personnel, and an older man in a suit who seemed to be expecting them. Sir, the man said with a bow of respect. Everything is prepared. Rami nodded. Thank you, Amir. Have the doctors arrived? Evelyn's breath hitched. Doctors? He turned to her. We need answers. If someone did this to you, they left traces. The medical team here is discreet, highly skilled. They'll examine you, run tests. Evelyn took a step back. You mean, like an experiment? Rami's brows furrowed. No, this is about protecting you. If there's any sign of foul play, any evidence that can help us figure out who's behind this, we need to find it. Her body tensed. The thought of more tests, more hands prodding and poking at her, made her stomach churn. But she also knew that knowledge was power. Fine, she said, swallowing her fear. But I want answers too. You'll have them, Rami assured her. She followed him down a long, elegant hallway, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. Every step she took felt heavier, weighed down by the knowledge that her life was no longer her own. A doctor, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, was already waiting in a private medical suite. Miss Carter, she greeted. I'm Dr. Yasmin. I understand you've been through quite an ordeal. Evelyn crossed her arms protectively over her stomach. That's one way to put it. Dr. Yasmin offered a gentle nod. I'll make this as quick and painless as possible. We'll start with an ultrasound to confirm the health of the baby, then run some blood work to check for any foreign substances or medical tampering. Evelyn's throat tightened. You think someone drugged me? It's a possibility, the doctor said carefully. But we won't know for sure until we examine you. Evelyn felt the room spinning. This was too much, too surreal. But she forced herself to nod and lay down on the examination bed. Rami stood nearby, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as the doctor prepared the ultrasound machine. The cold gel against her stomach made her flinch, but she held still as the probe moved over her skin. And then, the screen flickered to life, showing a tiny form, curled and moving inside her. Evelyn's breath caught. It was real. Her baby. Tears stung her eyes as she stared at the screen. A rush of emotions flooded her. Fear, confusion, but also something deeper, something raw. Rami stepped closer, his gaze locked onto the image. For the first time since she had met him, she saw something shift in his expression, something that looked like awe. The moment was shattered when the doctor frowned. "What?" Evelyn asked, her heart skipping a beat. "What's wrong?" Dr. Yasmin hesitated, adjusting the screen. "This is unusual." A sharp chill ran down Evelyn's spine. "What do you mean?" The doctor's voice was careful but firm. "The embryo, it appears to have been genetically modified." The words hit her like a sledgehammer. Genetically modified. Rami stiffened beside her. "Explain." Dr. Yasmin exhaled. "The child's DNA has been altered in a way that suggests scientific intervention. This isn't a natural pregnancy, nor is it a simple case of artificial insemination. This is something else." Evelyn's hands gripped the sheets. "You're saying my baby was designed?" The doctor nodded grimly. "Yes. And whatever they did, it wasn't by accident." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Someone had played God with her body. And now she was carrying something she couldn't even begin to understand. Evelyn's body went numb as the weight of the doctor's words settled in. Genetically modified. She lay frozen on the examination bed, her breath shallow, her mind spiraling into chaos. Her baby, wasn't just a life growing inside her. It was a deliberate creation engineered for a purpose she couldn't begin to understand. Rami's jaw was tight, his entire posture rigid. "Are you certain?" His voice was sharp, but beneath it Evelyn could hear something else, something bordering on fear. Dr. Yasmin nodded, her expression grim. "I'll need to run more tests to understand the full extent of the modifications, but from what I can already see, this was not a normal conception. This child's genetic code has been tampered with at a level far beyond standard medical science." Evelyn gripped the edge of the bed, her nails digging into the fabric. "Are you saying this baby isn't human?" The doctor hesitated. "No. The child is human, but enhanced. Someone wanted this baby to be more than ordinary." Evelyn felt her pulse thunder in her ears. "More how?" Dr. Yasmin exhaled, glancing at Rami before answering. "Stronger. Smarter. Possibly immune to diseases. Maybe even resistant to aging. Whoever did this wasn't just creating a child. They were designing a legacy." A shiver ran through Evelyn. Her hands instinctively wrapped around her stomach. "Why me?" Rami turned to the doctor. "Can you determine who's responsible for this?" Dr. Yasmin pursed her lips. "Not yet. But this level of genetic engineering isn't something just anyone can do. We're talking about cutting-edge technology, something only the most advanced bio-research facilities would have access to. I can send the blood samples to trusted specialists, but if we dig too deep, we'll attract attention." Rami's eyes darkened. "They already know we're looking." A cold realization settled over Evelyn. "That's why they were chasing us. They didn't just want to take me. They wanted to make sure no one found out what they did." Dr. Yasmin sighed. "And that means they won't stop coming." Evelyn's stomach churned. "So what do we do?" Rami's expression hardened. "We find out who did this. And we end it." The determination in his voice sent a chill through her. She barely knew him, but one thing was clear: Rami wasn't just some billionaire caught in a scandal. He was dangerous in a way that made her both wary and oddly comforted. He would do whatever it took to protect what was his. And right now, that included her. The door to the medical suite suddenly burst open, and Amir, the older man in the suit, stormed in, his face pale. "Sir, we have a problem." Rami straightened. "What is it?" Amir hesitated before speaking. "A security breach. We detected an intrusion attempt on the estate's surveillance system. Whoever it was, they were searching for her." Evelyn's blood ran cold. They had found her. Rami's face darkened with lethal intensity. "Lock down the estate. Double security on all perimeters. No one comes in or out without my clearance." Amir nodded. "Understood." Evelyn sat up, her body trembling. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Rami's gaze met hers. "No. And that means we have to move before they do." Panic tightened her chest. "Move where?" "I thought this place was safe." It was, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But they're getting closer. And if they're willing to risk hacking into my system, it means they're getting desperate." Dr. Yasmin stepped forward. Then she can't stay here. Not if you want to keep her alive. Evelyn's stomach twisted. Where do I go? Rami didn't hesitate. Somewhere they'll never expect. She swallowed hard. And where's that? His eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time since she had woken up in this nightmare, she saw something raw and unshakable in his gaze. With me. Evelyn's breath hitched at Rami's words. With him. She wanted to argue, to tell him that running off with a stranger wasn't the solution. But deep down, she knew the truth. There was nowhere else to go. Whoever was behind this wouldn't stop until they had her and the baby. Rami turned to Amir. Prepare the jet. We leave within the hour. Amir gave a sharp nod and hurried out of the room, leaving Evelyn feeling even more unsteady. She sat frozen on the examination table, her arms instinctively wrapping around her stomach. Where are we going? She finally asked. Rami met her gaze. A place even my enemies don't know exists. Evelyn swallowed hard. And if they find us there? Then they'll regret it, he said, his voice edged with steel. The room fell silent and Evelyn exhaled shakily. Her world had been ripped apart in the span of a few days, and now she was supposed to trust a man she barely knew to keep her safe. But what choice did she have? Dr. Yasmin placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's shoulder. This is a lot to take in, but stress isn't good for the baby. Try to stay calm. Calm? How is she supposed to stay calm when her life had turned into a science experiment wrapped in a high-stakes conspiracy? But she nodded anyway. Rami glanced at his watch. We need to move. Now. Minutes later, Evelyn found herself back in the sleek black SUV, the tinted windows shielding them from prying eyes. The estate's gates opened slowly and the convoy of vehicles surged forward into the dark desert night. Evelyn clenched her hands in her lap, every muscle in her body coiled tight. What's the plan? Rami's voice was low. First, we get out of the country. Then, we figure out who did this to you. Evelyn frowned. You don't already know? His jaw tightened. I have suspicions. But no proof. She exhaled shakily. And what if we never find proof? His dark eyes flicked to hers. Then we make them come to us. A shiver ran down her spine. There was something terrifying about the way he said it, like he was willing to burn the world down to get answers. The SUV picked up speed as they neared the private airstrip. In the distance, Evelyn saw the glowing lights of a sleek, white jet waiting for them. Then, a sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The SUV swerved violently and Evelyn was thrown sideways as a deafening boom echoed through the night. Down! Rami shouted, pushing her low into the seat as gunfire erupted outside. Evelyn's heart pounded as the convoy of vehicles screeched to a stop. Through the tinted windows, she saw shadows moving, figures dressed in black, armed with rifles. They were under attack. Stay here, Rami ordered, reaching for the weapon hidden under his seat. Panic surged through her. What? No. You can't just. But he was already out the door, moving with lethal precision. His men followed, returning fire as bullets tore through the night air. Evelyn's breath came in ragged gasps. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body was frozen in terror. Then, the SUV door was ripped open. A masked man lunged inside, grabbing for her. Evelyn reacted on instinct, kicking out with everything she had. The man grunted, stumbling back, but he was fast, too fast. He grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. "No!" she screamed, thrashing wildly. A gunshot rang out. The man jerked violently, then collapsed at her feet. Evelyn's breath came in sharp gasps as she turned to see Rami standing just outside the SUV, his gun still aimed at the lifeless attacker. His expression was dark. Merciless. "Get out," he ordered, grabbing her hand. "We need to move now." Her legs trembled as she stumbled out of the SUV. The gunfire was relentless, but Rami's grip was firm, pulling her toward the jet. One of his men was already at the base of the stairs, holding the door open. "Go," he shouted. Rami shoved Evelyn up the steps, his body shielding hers as another round of bullets whizzed past them. She practically fell into the jet, gasping for breath. Within seconds, Rami was inside too, barking orders to the pilot. "Take off now." The engines roared to life, and Evelyn's heart pounded as the plane began moving down the runway. Through the small window, she saw the gunmen scattering as the jet lifted off the ground, escaping into the dark sky. Her hands were shaking violently as she turned to Rami. Who the hell were they? His expression was unreadable. People who don't want the truth coming out. She swallowed hard. And what truth is that? He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. That you're carrying something far more valuable than either of us realized. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. This wasn't just about her anymore. Whoever had done this to her had plans for the baby. And now they would stop at nothing to take it back. Evelyn's hands trembled as the jet soared higher into the night sky, leaving the chaos behind. Her mind was a storm of fear, confusion, and unanswered questions. She turned to Rami, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean, far more valuable? What are they after?" Rami leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable, but she could see the tension in his jaw. He wasn't just angry, he was calculating, weighing every possible move like a man who had played this game before. "Your baby isn't just a child, Evelyn." His dark eyes locked onto hers. "It's a weapon." A cold shiver ran through her. A what?" Rami exhaled, rubbing his temple as if the weight of his words pained him. "I've seen genetic experiments before. There are groups, powerful ones, who invest billions into research that could give them the upper hand in war, medicine, and technology. They create perfect humans. Stronger, smarter, immune to disease. Some even believe they can engineer soldiers who don't feel fear, don't age, don't break." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "That's insane." His expression didn't change. "Is it? Think about it. If someone could create the next evolution of humanity, what do you think they'd do to protect their investment?" Her breath hitched. "They'd do anything." Rami nodded grimly. "Exactly. And now they know we have their most successful creation." Evelyn's body turned ice cold. "You mean," she looked down at her stomach, her hands instinctively pressing against it. "My baby is one of them?" Rami hesitated before answering. "Not just one of them. The first of its kind." Her head spun. "How do you know all of this?" Rami hesitated, then stood up, pacing the small cabin. The man who had been so composed before was visibly shaken now, his fingers raking through his hair. "Because I was supposed to fund the project." The words hit her like a truck. "What?" He turned back to her, his gaze heavy with guilt. "Years ago, I was approached by a biotech company that claimed they were working on life-saving treatments. They needed funding. I invested." He let out a humorless laugh. "Turns out, they weren't just looking to cure diseases. They were creating something entirely new." Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. "And you still funded them?" Rami's jaw clenched. "Not once I found out the truth. When I realized what they were doing, playing God, I pulled my money and shut down everything connected to me. I thought that was the end of it." His fists tightened. But clearly, someone kept going. Evelyn felt sick. "So this thing inside me was their experiment?" Rami's expression softened just slightly. "It's still your baby, Evelyn. No matter how it was created." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to pretend this was just a nightmare she would wake up from. But there was no waking up from this. She was carrying something that people would kill for. Suddenly, the jet jolted violently. Evelyn gasped, gripping the seat. "What was that?" Rami turned toward the cockpit just as the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Sir, we have a tail? Unidentified aircraft. They're closing in fast." Evelyn's blood turned to ice. "They found us." Rami didn't hesitate. He strode toward the cockpit, barking orders. "Evasive maneuvers. Get us out of here." The jet swerved sharply, pressing Evelyn against the seat as they tried to escape. She forced herself to look out the window, and what she saw made her stomach drop. A black aircraft was following them, sleek and deadly, its lights blinking in the darkness. Then, a missile launched straight toward them. The jet's alarms blared. The pilot shouted something, but Evelyn couldn't hear over the deafening roar of her own heartbeat. They were going to die. The plane jerked into a steep dive as the missile closed in. Evelyn screamed, clutching the seat as the cabin filled with red warning lights. And then, an explosion erupted just outside, shaking the jet violently. The missile had missed. Or rather, been destroyed. Evelyn's breath came in sharp gasps. "What just happened?" The pilot's voice crackled again. "We have an escort. 2 jets just arrived, fighters. They took out the missile." Rami exhaled, his tense shoulders loosening just slightly. He turned to Evelyn. "We're not out of the game yet." But as Evelyn's pulse slowed, a new dread filled her chest. If someone had sent fighter jets to save them, it meant someone even more powerful was watching. The jet sliced through the night sky, escorted by the 2 fighter planes that had appeared out of nowhere. Evelyn's hands trembled as she gripped the armrests, her mind racing. Who had sent the jets? And why? Rami was already on the phone, speaking in rapid Arabic. His voice was sharp, controlled, but there was an edge to it. Whoever was on the other end wasn't just an ally. They were someone powerful. Evelyn swallowed hard. "Where are we going now?" Rami ended the call and turned to her. "A place where no one can touch us." His cryptic words sent another chill down her spine. She wasn't sure if she was escaping one nightmare only to walk into another. The jet flew for hours before finally descending. Evelyn peered out the window, expecting another airstrip, another hidden estate in the middle of nowhere. But what she saw made her breath hitch. They were landing on a private island. The water surrounding it was deep and dark, and the land itself was fortified, security towers, heavily armed guards, and high-tech defenses that made it clear this wasn't just a safe house. This was a fortress. Evelyn's stomach twisted. Where are we? Rami met her gaze. The only place they won't dare attack. The jet touched down smoothly, and within seconds, the doors opened. The warm, salty air rushed in, carrying the scent of the sea. But there was no time to take it in. Armed guards were already waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Rami guided her down, his grip firm but not forceful. She could tell he was still on edge. A tall man in a crisp white thobe stepped forward, his face partially shadowed beneath the glow of the overhead lights. His presence alone commanded attention. Evelyn stiffened as the man's piercing gaze landed on her. Rami greeted him with a nod. Uncle. Her breath caught. This was Rami's family? The man studied her carefully before turning back to Rami. You have made quite the mess. His voice was deep, steady, dangerous in its calmness. Rami's jaw clenched. I didn't start this. The man's eyes flickered to Evelyn's stomach. But now you must finish it. Evelyn's pulse roared. She could feel the weight of this conversation, the unspoken truths between them. These weren't just rich men, they were kingmakers, people who operated above laws, above governments. Rami's uncle turned back to her. Do you understand the gravity of this situation? Evelyn exhaled sharply. I didn't ask for any of this. The man nodded. No, but now you must live with it. His voice softened just slightly. And you must protect that child with everything you have. Evelyn hesitated. And what if they come for us again? Rami's voice was cold. Then we end this war before it starts. A heavy silence settled between them. Rami's uncle turned to the guards. Ensure they are safe. No one comes in or out without my permission. With that, he walked away, leaving Evelyn standing in the middle of the most dangerous sanctuary in the world. She turned to Rami. What now? His expression softened as he reached for her hand. Now we stop running. For the first time in days, Evelyn let out a shaky breath. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where they could be safe. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.